Warm welcome to the Elite Science on behalf of Marcus Evans and the team. My name is Jason Davies. I'm the Chief Client Officer for Marcus Evans. The purpose of our gathering now for the next 40 minutes or so is to give you an insight on, from our investors' perspective, on what they expect from the meetings and some tips of best practice and how they prefer to be followed up with, etc., etc. But before we go on to that, I want to obviously give a special warm welcome to Agriculture Asset Management, Sago Capital Partners, Blue Bay, Henley and Partners, Proximo, and the Samoa International Finance Authority. These are our open contract partners that are present at the event, so thank you for your business and a very warm welcome as well. And next to Todd, we have Martin Stroud from Envisage Wealth Management. So over to you, Todd, and here's yours.
Thank you. I'm just going to run through a series of questions here which are really designed to help you think about how you approach these meetings. And Jason and I have done several of these panels. And when the delegates speak, I'm still astonished by some of the responses in terms of their perceptions of the sponsors. And actually what the sponsors think they are doing, but in reality what they're not doing. And that really can make the difference between getting a client and not getting a client. Okay, so where I really want to begin here is obviously the one-to-one meetings, they are key business catalysts. How do you think a sponsor should prepare for and tailor their approach to the meetings to win your business? Nigel?
I think it's almost, you don't need to tailor it. I think there's a perception amongst the product providers of what it is that I want. And so I get presented a lot on what it is they think I'm doing rather than what it is I am doing, or the flexibility I can have about how we invest. So I guess it's not being too dictatorial about too rigid about what it is that you're doing. Particularly if you've got a structure. If you come up with a structure, it's very difficult sometimes to realise that the structure doesn't help. It gets in the way of the communication because you end up talking about the structure rather than the underlying.
Akbar, will you agree with that and just amplify it? Yeah.
Yes, I do agree on that. My experience is that most sponsors, they have a presentation fully ready and they go through the presentation. And what I miss in most cases, a sense of empathy. That I have a sense that the sponsors have taken a look at the delegates they are going to meet, have at least taken a look at their website, for example, what they are doing, what their needs are, what their perspectives are, and work that through in the communication. And just what Nigel said, it doesn't really add value if it's just a one-way conversation. It's just a way of getting to know each other. It's a very short time, 25 minutes. So you shouldn't expect that 25 minutes to get a client altogether.
Yeah, but I can hear probably what a lot of people are thinking who are sitting there listening. Jesus, I've just spent all this time putting this presentation together, and what you're suggesting here is that sometimes having this structure is not always the best way to approach it, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Martin, your perceptions.
This is like the really big question. Like, how do we help sell better? And it's a very, very difficult one to address. A couple of suggestions. When somebody sits down with me, I think one of the most effective ways to start is to ask, what interests me, or why did I choose to sit with this particular provider, or what's on my mind, or what interests me, and then try and address that. There are two weaknesses with a number of the presentations that I've had here, and one is that it tends to be a little bit too long, and some some presenters work to what I would call almost a fixed script. It's an easy trap to fall into, because when you get simply one family office or one potential client, one buyer after another, you sort of fall into a script. So one thing you can try straight up is, what interests you, what's on your mind, and then try and address that, and try and move away from the script and treat each case as unique.
I think what you're all suggesting here too is that, because it's a very small period, 25 minutes, and you paid a lot of money to be here, you feel you have to get through a lot sometimes. But perhaps a better way, do you think, of approaching this is that this is just the beginning of a conversation, not the end point. And if you're effective, then you can have further dialogue. Would you agree with that, Akbar?
Yes, I do. It's just what I said just recently. It's a matter of the sponsors putting an interest in the delegates. But I have to make, now I'm here at the stage, also a small piece of criticism to the organization. Because we see only at the day of arrival the sponsors we are going to meet. So in advance you don't go in depth to the stories of all the sponsors. So you have a very short period of time to look into the details and the aspects of the sponsors you are going to meet. So my suggestion to the organization would be to present this a couple of days earlier, presumably a week earlier if possible, so that also we, who are spending also 3 days of our valuable time, to have a lot of meetings, 16 or 20, something like that, to make it so effective as possible.
That's some good feedback. Nigel, we talked about some of the mistakes that you think, all of you think, that the sponsors make. They take a structural approach instead of an individual approach. They think what I want instead of really what I need. And that was the point that you were making. They don't always start the conversation with what interests you to really find out, what may be most effective. So those are some of the mistakes. But if you had to single out the single biggest mistake that you think most sponsors make in a 30-minute meeting with you, what would it be? Well, you go to if you want.
Well, can I reframe it this way? There's a lot of young ladies in the audience I can see, and this is a first date. It's just a first date. If you exchange cards with someone and you've met them, then there's an opportunity to follow up after the first date. But you've got to be interested on the first date, otherwise the young lady doesn't really want to take your calls. Now, I think universally, the guys on the sort of receiving end, or the gals on the receiving end, we don't want to dislike anybody. There are some things that we don't like. That's not to say we don't like you. We just don't like sometimes what it is that's been presented because it's just not on our radar. And it's not personal. And the reason I say that is because on Friday I got a new mandate. Up until now I'd only had 2 mandates, now I've got 3 mandates. So I don't know what the new mandate's going to be. So I'm quite happy to listen to things that I wouldn't necessarily ordinarily listen to. And indeed, if you're on the sponsor list, then there's a likelihood that if something comes up, I'm much more likely to trawl through the old stuff, the old listings, then I have to start searching around on the internet. So it is known now, sometimes. And again, I think the prescriptive side is we don't like funds, particularly. So we need the flexibility when we're talking to people that if you've got a great idea, and many of you have got tons of great ideas, you really have, and I'm amazed at the breadth of what it is that's brought to the table. But don't be so prescriptive. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. And it can be wrapped in a number of different ways. And it really doesn't matter too much how you get your money, as long as you get your money.
Akbar, your thoughts on this? The single biggest mistake a sponsor can make and the most important points you think that should be made in the pitch?
The biggest mistake, as far as I'm concerned, is that sponsors keep on talking about what they want to say and not listening about the reaction I'm getting. Sometimes I'm allocated a meeting which was not on my preferred list and not on my second preferred list, but because of the fact that there are only 6 ways of rejecting a party, sometimes you get allocated a party you don't want to talk to. And of course, the first thing I tell in that conversation, actually, professionally, I don't want to talk to you. So, let's have a conversation what I'm doing, what you're doing, and see where we can help each other, maybe in other ways, maybe in contacts or something like that. And the other part of your question?
Most important points that should be made in the pitch.
Yeah, sometimes it seems to be very difficult to just name your USP. Of course, I understand that might be difficult, but try to explain why your company or your fund is different from your competitors. That's my advice.
You know, it's very interesting. We had a delegate with us in Las Vegas. Hugely successful in terms of what he's sold here over the years. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, he did 9 contracts in 2.5 months, something staggering.
Yeah, I was going to talk about Stuart Hay. He's probably our longest client. He's worked with us for over 13 years and he's an open contract partner. And he doesn't use anybody else other than Marcus Evans to prospect business. He's basically in private equity funds and secondaries. And he went to our Vegas event, well, not the Vegas event, he was there, but he went to the one in June, which was in Florida. And between June and October, he generated 9 new mandates out of 15 meetings because he allocated one attendee to that particular event. And what is particularly interesting about him, he actually speaks for about 5 minutes of the presentation. He gives the clients a one-page flyer and nothing else. And he basically spends the whole meeting listening to what they have to say, questioning them, finding out what they need, finding out what they want. And at the end of it, usually when the bell rings, he says, well, I better tell you what we do now. And then he does a very, very short pitch presentation. Make sure they're interested, and if they are, he pencils in immediately the follow-up meeting and follows up with all the necessary documentation by email and Outlook's invitations that very day. And he's basically generated a whole client base out of attending our events. He's attended over 40 events in 13 years, and he's never been to an event where he hasn't been successful.
You mentioned follow-up there. And I remember once we were in Asia, actually, a Chinese investor. He said he hadn't invested, but he was thinking about it. And the reason he did it with one person, because the person didn't follow up with him. Didn't follow up. Now, to me, excuse me, I'm not in sales, but that just seems to be such a no-brainer. But apparently, you think you are following up sometimes, and you're not. So your experience on the follow-up, is it consistent? Is it inconsistent?
Follow-up is widely inconsistent. You get sponsors from whom, I guarantee I'll get an email or a call once a month. And then there are sponsors that are basically just never hear from again. The most successful sponsors are the ones that do an immediate follow-up afterwards, but then don't try too hard, because I've had some that for the 6 months afterwards almost reach stalker status, and that's not what you want. I like the story about the guy who has been so successful because for the first 5 minutes he introduces himself and then he lets the other person talk. What this person is doing, in my opinion, is he's creating an emotional connection. He's establishing empathy, he's creating an emotional connection, and whether the delegate, either consciously or just subconsciously, is aware of it, he's creating a liking for this person because this person is listening to him. And this is really important. In this business, it's such a relationship-based business. We tend to do business with people we like. And if we don't like them, we just hook them to one side. And you know, as soon as something or someone lands in the interest, it's dead.
How important, how do you like, if these people out here, they've got something you're interested in, how do you like them to follow up? Do you like it through emails? How important is telephone calling? You know, what's the best way, the most effective way to follow up with you, Nigel and Akbar?
Well, for me, it's email, because if I have to talk to a lot of people all the time by telephone, it takes me too much time. Emails I can read at the time which is convenient for me. But I also fully agree with what Martin just said. Consistency in follow-up is key. Just ask what I want to receive, monthlies or quarterlies or whatever, and keep on sending them. Keep me on the mailing list, because my experience is I've been to the Marcus Evans events for I think 7 or 8 times, so I've seen between 150 and 200 sponsors. I think about 5% is consistent in its follow-up, so it's pretty poor.
5%, listen up there, okay? I mean, 5% out of about 150 meetings follow up effectively. So there's obviously a gap between what you think you're doing and what actually is going on. And the only reason I bring it up, this comes up time and time again in these panels where the follow-up doesn't happen, or doesn't happen in the time they say it's going to happen, or the information that they asked for is not sent, or more information is sent than they need. It's really important to really hone in exactly on the type of follow-up the client that you want, correct, Nigel? And
yeah, again, it's just ask, isn't it? I mean, I'm amused that really this is not difficult. You're enthusiastic about your product, and it's right that you should be interested in your product. But if you don't know what the audience is, I mean, it's like the actor that says, tells the person all about their movies and all the rest of it, you know, and then as soon as he asks him any question, he goes back to referring himself back to himself. You know.
But you find the follow-up inconsistent?
I find it difficult. There's a first flurry of excitement, and one of my mandates is a very slow burn. And it's very difficult if you've got something new, and a lot of the times you are bringing new things to the table. I've got to turn around a cargo ship, and it takes a little bit of time sometimes for to get that onto the agenda. And it's not personal. It really is not personal. And you need to be important to us. And the easiest way to be important to us is relevant, so that we can continue to put it on the agenda. Because I promise you, we do get besieged. I get besieged. And there are other people competing with you in your product areas. And the noisy one's going to get the deal largely. Maybe one of the quiet ones has been outlined already, but not usually. Not usually. If you're persistent, persistence and perseverance is the 2 hallmarks of a salesperson. And unfortunately, if you're not salespeople naturally, you've got to have those 2 characteristics.
But how do you differentiate the person who's persistent versus the stalker? You know, that I think is where the real art lies. Yeah.
Well, I think you have to ask what would distinguish in my mind what it is between being a damn nuisance and being a good memory jogger.
So they should ask you.
Yeah, sure, why not? I mean, how else can we do business except on a personal basis? I mean, my guys are on a personal basis.
Yes, I agree. That's very important to be consistent in your information flow. And be patient. That's very important, because most sponsors think that I'm sitting on a bag of money and just can allocate whatever I want. But of course, all these proposals have to be discussed with the principals, and they have to get used to the idea, and they have to get used that I'm enthusiastic about a certain investment. So I have to communicate that with my principal, and have to wait when I have made him as enthusiastic for a proposition as I am.
We just have a few minutes left, because I want to make sure you get over there in time. It takes about maybe 10 minutes. Do any of you have any questions for these three delegates who've had a lot of experience in sponsor meetings and heard where some of their concerns lie and where some of the fault lines are? Any of you have any questions that you'd like to ask them? Yeah, please, you go ahead.
I just want to know, when did you get the details of the sponsored companies? Have you done some research prior to this? Because we're not aware of that.
The full sponsor list is distributed, I think, a month, 5 weeks before the
It's
event.
usually about a week before you get your passport.
But that's the complete list, and I'm not going to study every sponsor in detail if I'm not sure who I'm going to have a meeting with, of course. So my suggestion to Marcus Evans is to send the delegates a list of the 16 or 20 meetings they are going to have during these 2 days, specifically naming the parties, the sponsors they are going to meet, so that we have the opportunity to prepare us properly for the event as well, and to make the time efficient for both sides.
Yeah, because I agree there should have been a cloud system in which you can dump stuff in which either party can, prior to this, can actually do a lot more study about your company and where it's headed in this direction. Because we're coming in very cold to some companies. I just feel your company is cold too.
You can actually view your agendas online after the meeting schedule has been run. If you go back into your meeting scheduler and you go to step 4, you can print out your agenda, both for sponsors and delegates, so you can see who you've got meetings with immediately the very next day after you've made your selections. That may change though with alterations between the time you've made your selections and the time you get to the event, but it very rarely changes.
I just think background papers are essential sometimes.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And that's where I'm heading is, I use it a little bit more than the website, and you need a little bit more than the website. And some of your directions for your 18-month, 3-year, 5-year strategic plan of investment. That's the same about.
I like your idea about the cloud thing. Could you put that on your evaluation form?
More than happy.
Thank you.
That will cost me.
Thank you very much.
No business now.
Yeah. Is there any other comment that anyone else wants to make or any other thought? Yes, please go ahead, sir. Yeah.
I would have a question to all of you. Why do you keep coming back to these?
Yeah. Why do you keep coming back? And that's a great question. Why do you keep coming back? And what makes you ultimately, because you have a wide array of products that you can choose from, choose one product over another. Is it the mandate or are there other factors involved as well? Akbar, I know you've bought several times.
The reason why I come back is because I'm constantly on the search for new managers, for new ideas, for new investment methods. And for me it's a way of monitoring how the business is developing itself and yes, to keep up to date with the latest developments.
And what makes you decide ultimately to buy with some or not to buy it? Because it fits into your mandate or are there other factors involved as well?
It's not only the professional side, but it's only a people business.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe one more.
Great. Please, yeah.
How do you feel about catching up in the informal moments during these 3 days? I mean during lunch or even to get more feedback, or is it then, not really the time to go further into a topic, or is that more later?
Yeah, Nigel, I think that's a great question. In other words, should the only time that the sponsor approaches you is when you're sitting face to face, or when over dinner and cocktails as well? Is it appropriate to further discuss investment ideas? Nigel, I would say probably yes.
I think absolutely. I mean, the whole point of being here, and the reason to amplify, I think, the question that Akbar asked, is because it takes you away from your day-to-day work. So this is a focus group. So why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you use as much of the time? As I said, I don't think anybody that I've met on the sort of buying side is against spending time talking about it. There's just sometimes an appropriateness as to how quickly that could necessarily be implemented. And you know, I could go back to the office, or whenever it is we go back to the office, and suddenly something's changed. And also there is an opportunity where there are changes, and I don't know what they are, so I can't anticipate them. But you've got to be dealing firstly with reliable buyers, I guess, and reliable suppliers, and that's what the event is really about, creating.
Jason, I turn it back to you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks guys. It was very helpful. I'm sure everybody's learned a lot from that. Just a couple of points from me. We've got almost 800 meetings to get through over the next 3 days, so obviously we need all your cooperation. You'll hear a bell after 25 minutes, which basically means you've got 5 minutes until the next appointment runs or comes up to your table. We'll bring them to you. Can you make sure that you end your meetings promptly, because your next meeting will be shortly coming and vice versa, somebody will be needed elsewhere. Also tomorrow, if you could, I think a lot of you have got on-site meetings with your account managers to continue or not your participation in future years. So we're almost at capacity now. We will be by tomorrow night. And we have one open contract which has been released. I know it's been offered to many of you. If anybody's interested, they can come see myself, Alan Brady, or Sean Mifsud, or your respective account managers, and we can finalise that for you on a first-come, first-served basis. Other than that, I spoke to Marcus Evans this morning. He'd like to send his personal thanks for sponsoring the event. Without your patronage, these things wouldn't be possible. And he'd like to wish you every good luck and best wishes for the next 3 days, and we hope you do much, much more business with you in the future. Good luck and thank you for your time. Thank you.